Welcome back to Sanish. I'm Joe Carducci, and if you're feeling whiplash from the headlines, you're not alone. This week, my kids came home from school and asked me if we were going to war. As a mom, I wish they were thinking about summer recess and going to the shore, but this is the reality of Trump's America. The guy who campaigned on no new wars has the world watching as he keeps everyone guessing on Iran, one day promising America first and no wars, and the next day hinting at bunker-busting strikes alongside Israel, and all the while insisting he can restore stability in the Middle East with a few decisive moves. Trump's position on U.S. involvement in the Iran-Israel conflict has shifted almost by the hour. He's told reporters, I may do it, I may not do it. Nobody knows what I'm going to do. His MAGA base is split, his advisors are divided, and America's allies and adversaries are holding their breath. Meanwhile, Iran is promising retaliation if the U.S. gets directly involved, and the world is bracing for consequences that could ripple far beyond the region. With so much at stake and so much spin, I wanted to bring on someone who can cut through all the noise. Today's guest is Joel Rubin, author of the briefing book on Substack. Joel is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, a seasoned national security expert, and co-founder of the Jewish Electorate Institute. He's advised on U.S.-Iran policy at the highest levels, worked on Capitol Hill, and is a frequent commentator on cable news and in print. Joel's got the rare ability to explain what's really happening behind the headlines and what it means for American families, for global security, and for the future of democracy. Joel, welcome to Sanish. Thank you for being here at a moment when clarity is in short supply. I would like to welcome to the Sanish podcast my dear friend and a nuclear and foreign policy expert. Oh, sorry. Let me do it properly. Nuclear, and I'm not...
According to the BBC.
According to the BBC. Television celebrity, nuclear expert, and foreign policy expert. All the titles that my ADHD brain, Joel, can't remember. Joel Rubin. Okay, can you... Welcome, first of all, my friend. We just started 2 days ago. Can you please tell the audience who may not know you, which is impossible for me to actually conceive of, who you are, your background, and why you are my phone a friend for all things Iran, Israel, Donald Trump, foreign diplomacy, bunker busters, etc.
Why the hell are you listening to me?
Don't say that. You're supposed to be the expert here. I'm the one asking the questions.
Yeah, I'm just a Jewish guy sitting in suburban DC. So, everybody, I'm Joel Rubin, and dear friend of Joe's. I have a Substack called The Briefing Book. Please join, subscribe.
Please subscribe.
And I've done a lot of different things in foreign policy and national security over the years. The best thing I did was I was a Peace Corps volunteer after college. I served in a couple of administrations at the State Department, in the Bush administration, in military affairs and Middle East affairs. Then I left and I got political because I hated the war in Iraq, which took over our government, and worked for Senate Democrats as a national security advisor, continued to work in political parts of foreign policy, advocating for nuclear diplomacy and arms control and the use of diplomacy to resolve our conflicts abroad, including Middle East peace issues, which clearly we were really successful, I should say. In foreign policy, it's not an easy line. And I was Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama at the State Department, which means I was a senior official and I was in charge of our work with the House of Representatives as legislative liaison. I've worked a lot in Jewish politics as well, in Jewish organizations, and think about politics and foreign policy and how they come together. And these days, of course, with Iran on the top of mind, this is not like a new issue. This is something that has been percolating for years. And so, Joe, I always enjoy being with you and hearing the smarter questions which come from you than from the BBC.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you very much. As you know, like I say, you're my phone a friend on all of these things because you have a way of distilling very complicated, very nuanced, very historic, and long ranging in terms of chronological events. These things that I don't a lot of people I don't think really fully understand. And you mentioned the war in Iraq. And what I want to ask, I guess, first is, are we looking at another protracted war that the Americans will be involved in Iran that will end up keeping us there the way we have been in Iraq?
I don't believe we are. That doesn't mean that we aren't necessarily getting into a war and a conflict in the Middle East, but no two wars are the same. Just for a little backtracking, when September 11th happened, I was serving in government at the time, and at the State Department where I was working, after working in the Energy Department as well, we got involved in the war against terror and trying to find bin Laden, and then got distracted and moved by the Bush administration, which led us into war with Iraq, got moved in that direction. And so those were very different wars, and they both ended up becoming what we call forever wars, but they were very different. They had different objectives, one to fight terrorism, one to deal with the nuclear threat, a lot of other stuff in between. This is different and distinct. But the one truism about war in the Middle East is that once you get in, it's incredibly difficult to get out. Once you decide to dedicate military force, there is always a response. There is not a clean one direction shot. And so as we contemplate, and as Donald Trump contemplates involving us in this, he has to really think through. And I know that you and I both agree, he's very deliberative. He seeks the best advice. He looks for the true empirical analysis of what can and cannot happen. And he plans for all contingencies. So don't worry, we're in good hands.
The best people also believe me. Yes. Yeah. We're in really good hands. I mean, it's not terrifying at all, because this is a person who talks in WWE terms like, it's the ultimate ultimatum. I mean, this is a unconditional surrender. Like, that's what he's tweeting. And he's saying things like, I don't know yet what I'm going to do. Maybe I do know what I'm going to do. And maybe I know exactly what I'm going to do. But he doesn't, first of all, he doesn't know what he's going to do. But what I'm curious about, before you sort of give people who might understand sort of a little bit of the Cliff's Notes on how we got here, is now that we've learned that, I don't know if you've heard this, I'm sure you probably have, that he's sidelined Tulsi, that because she...
Not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, that's a segue to a bigger question about Tulsi, Bannon, Carlson, the pro-Putin.
Putin advising directly on our war strategy. I'm sorry.
That is another question that I have, because you see this Putin simp wing, Bannon, Carlson, Gabbard out there saying, no, do not do this. This will fracture the party.
Would make you really suspicious. I'm sorry. I will let you get your question out. Everything you say is like bringing out thoughts, feelings, and actions.
But we have to get to all of them, because and we have to do it in less than 25 minutes, because this is all important stuff. But what I want to know is, who is advising this fucking idiot? Pardon my expletives, is how we keep it real, because I think he's a fucking idiot. Because is it just Marco Rubio at this point? Are there any adults left in the room? And does he have any, like, honest to God, like, real strategy? Because we know he's not a strategic person. But what do you think, if you could get into his drug-addled mind, is his strategy, and who's advising him?
Look, the decision-making of Donald Trump is highly impulsive. We all know that. And I'll answer your question, but just give a little tiny history lesson, because in Washington today, history is like 3 weeks ago, right? Yeah. And just 3 weeks ago, there was a lot of discussion about how he was seeking a nuclear deal with Iran, which I think it was faux diplomacy. I think we were duping the Iranians, that he was telling the Israelis to back off. Obviously, that was a short-lived goal. And, I will say the Israelis have a reason for doing what they're doing, but let's put that to the side, because we want to talk about Trump in this case. And so the issue is who's he listening to? And he should, in theory, be listening to our chairman of the Joint Chiefs, our Secretary of Defense and State, what we call the principles around the National Security Council table. Unfortunately, he's embarked in the past few months on a purge of expertise inside the United States government. one bureau, for example, the State Department that handles nuclear security issues that would potentially be tasked with ensuring that whatever is done, we can understand its impact on the nuclear issues related to Iran. That bureau is being moved to another bureau and throwing people into chaos, and a lot of early retirements from the top nuclear experts at the State Department. If you recall, Elon Musk and all of his wisdom thinking that these are irrelevant jobs, fired the nuclear experts at the Energy Department who would be behind the scenes giving advice through the intelligence community and others and state their assessment of Iran's nuclear capacity and infrastructure. And if we're going to bomb, what we should hit to make sure that we're actually effective, right? So all of that matters. There is a decision that the president makes, but the decision is not like yes or no. It's like a decision on top of a pile of mini decisions that lead to an effective policy outcome. And that's my big concern. In war and in these kinds of actions, execution or implementation is just as important as the decision. So if he says yes, bomb, I think that we're going to lean heavily on DOD to do what it does best, which is destroy things. That is why we have a Defense Department. They are constructed to destruct. But then what about our intelligence community? Are they going to be able to verify whether or not we were effective? What about our diplomacy? Will we work with our regional allies to contain the potential chaos inside Iran with our European partners? What about a potential reconstruction? What about potential economic development? Is the Commerce Department doing anything? Like, there's a lot of questions that I just don't think are being asked. But I do understand why he is itchy to support these Israeli strikes, because now that Israel is in militarily, where it's kind of like a pincer grip. We're stuck now because a half measure on the nuclear program could actually, if it's not completely eviscerated, could encourage Iran to go quickly and fast to building a nuclear bomb much faster than they otherwise would have. So we're really in a bind here.
Yeah. Why is there so much? It seems that there's a lot of disagreement about how close they actually are. Like, again, Tulsi Gabbard says one thing, Putin's simple, but nonetheless, she says one thing. And Trump said yesterday he doesn't care what she says. I mean, I was hearing today that there's some reports that it's like if they get to 90%, then they can build a bomb. They're at like 83%. But the Israelis have their own intelligence. Obviously, the Israelis are particularly good at intelligence, particularly as it relates to Iran. But what is your sense of, if you had to speculate on how close they are?
Well, prior to the kinetic action, prior to the Israeli decision to attack last Thursday, Gabbard's assessment, her language was like verbatim from the intelligence community. To her credit, she basically read what they wrote. And what she said was that we have not assessed that Iran has made the political decision to make a nuclear weapon, period. And that's been a longstanding intelligence community assessment going back a couple of decades. The challenge at the moment with that is that the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, which we don't run, it's independent and it is highly credible. They castigated Iran about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and they censured them for the first time in 20 years for surpassing limits that they had agreed to, for not being transparent, not allowing inspections, and for enriching to levels at 60%, which is a stone's throw from 90%, which is where you get to weaponized materials, and stockpiling enough enriched uranium for 9 to 10 nuclear bombs if they were going to weaponize that enriched material, which, here's the kicker, they can do in Fordo, which is the underground bunker that everybody's talking about. So they were out of control. And the Iranians really went too far. And when the negotiations were failing and Israel was threatening, they said, we're going to build another enrichment facility. So talk about poking the bear. And they did. And Netanyahu said, by the way, you don't have Hezbollah anymore to threaten us. You don't have air defenses. This is the time. And he went for it. And so I think that assessment might have been right at the time, but I think it's fair to say, and I'll probably get some grief from some nuclear experts for it. It's fair to say that while we did not have the smoking gun of evidence and they had the weapon or decided to do it, they have put together all the pieces. There is one last piece, though, and that is to actually fit it on a warhead and stick it on one of those missiles that they're now sending into Tel Aviv. They have not done that work, we believe. That metal metallurgy, that work. And so Israel is striking those facilities where that could be done as well. So Israel's strikes are essentially damaging and delaying the program and pushing it back from the 1 to 2 week breakout window that they had, which, by the way, President Obama had extended to 1 year with the nuclear deal. But but now, so Trump, I think there's some truth to what Trump is saying about there being close, and there's a lot of truth to what Gabbard is saying. They're sort of saying two different things, but of course he demonstrated that he didn't like Tulsi saying what she said.
Right. A lot of this mess that we're in right now, though, does go back to, speaking of things blowing up, to Trump blowing up the deal that you've said was one of the most significant pieces of diplomatic legislation we've had since the Cold War, which was the JCPOA under Barack Obama. But Donald Trump destroyed it and pulled us out of that, probably because he fucking hates Barack Obama, honestly, and didn't really understand what the implications of what he was doing. But can you talk about that and how that got us here?
It's the original sin of this moment, where Donald Trump campaigned against the Iran nuclear deal. And it's funny, I'll just tell you, I did a CNN hit yesterday where I debated Governor Scott Walker, and he started yelling, and Town Hall is, I know, love it. And Town Hall is attacking me for that fight. And there's a lot of feelings about that period, because what President Obama did essentially is negotiate a deal with Iran after multiple years of negotiations that verifiably constrained Iran's nuclear program. It did not take it out. It did not get rid of it. Israel was not thrilled, but they went along with it. The Europeans were partners with us on it, and they had very low levels of enriched uranium, where it would take about a year to build a nuclear weapon if they had chosen to, whereas now it's about 10 days roughly. And we took out all of their enriched material, and we had constraints upon their centrifuges, and with the IAEA verifying it, right? So, but in return, that meant sanctions relief to Iran. So Trump ran against it, attacked it, called a weak deal, bad deal, lousy deal, blah, 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 blah. He spent a couple of years in the White House, and he was saying that all the time politically to attack Obama and Hillary Clinton by extension. And then in 2018, he withdrew the United States from that deal. The deal essentially went into free fall, and Iran was relieved of the constraints that the deal had imposed on them, because the United States was not living up to our commitments of sanctions relief as part of that agreement. Therefore, they also did not live up to their commitments.
Right.
Highly risky, highly dangerous. There's a lot of karma in this moment right now that when Obama negotiated, he said, basically, you either get an Iranian bomb or a war or a diplomatic agreement to kind of deal with this issue. And this is Donald Trump's moment, because Donald Trump led us to this moment, and that's where we are right now.
And not only isn't he capable of a diplomatic pathway, just fundamentally, he has is eviscerated anyone around him, any of the adults that might have been there in the first season of this shit show. So now he doesn't have any.
I've got to tell you, if I may, in that first administration, there were highly experienced national security professionals around him, including his chief of staff and John Kelly. And there were many good people around him. There were also some wingnuts, and John Bolton was his national security advisor, and Bolton hated the deal. But basically, it took Trump a couple of years to get out of the deal. He got a lot of pressure for a lot of time. And there was a seminal moment when Emmanuel Macron came here and said, don't get out of it. Let's negotiate a tougher deal, better deal. And Trump said no. And it reminded me of the January 6th pardons, when it was like debate, discussion, yes, no, should we make it a little better? Should we negotiate? Should we focus on who to pardon versus who not to pardon? It's like, no. Done. Pardon them all. So that's what I think is going to drive his decision-making, is sort of just an impulsive, just go for it. And the problem is that from my experience working on Iraq at the State Department, is that Colin Powell had this line, the Secretary of State, which was, if you break it, you buy it. So you own it now, Iraq. You broke Iraq, you own Iraq. We do what we need to do, let's say in Iran. We hit them. We eviscerate the nuclear program. Right now, we're in that dynamic where I think that there's an argument for why we should. But we then are responsible for what comes next.
Mm-hmm.
But because he doesn't want to do nation building or doesn't want to do forever wars or get involved, I think he'll walk away, leave it to be. And so that creates a whole bunch of other things that that's like Pandora's box opening up right in front of us.
I mean, talk about destabilizing and talk about setting us up for what I worry about, which is, retributive attacks, terrorist attacks, not just against us here on our soil, but against our military that are based all around the world, including in the region. But I'm also worried, again, this is me, a Jersey mama too, who doesn't understand 100% all of the, nuances of this. But there are things that he can do to our ships and Navy personnel in the region that could put them in immediate danger. Can you talk about what Iran could do in both preemptive, but in a retributive response to us doing something? And then I want to also talk about what it would look like for us to actually do something, because Israel cannot do things that we can do. But I want to talk about the implications of Trump deciding to go ahead and do this, but also what happens in the vacuum after, for sure. But yeah, and I'm worried about what the immediate impact and danger will be to American service members and here on our own soil.
So there's a lot of potential negative downstream consequences of a strike, and they've been out in the discussion for a number of years in the policy community. For example, the Straits of Hormuz, which is the transit point through which like a significant amount, 60%, some of the world's oil traffic goes through. Iran has a capacity to shut it down, and that would require the U.S. Navy to unshut it, right? There are 47,000 American troops in the region at different bases in like a dozen countries. They could be targeted. Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism for a reason. They are able to exact a price against soft targets in a diabolical way, and do that throughout with assassinations, bombings of Jewish centers, for example, in Argentina over the years. And they have people all around the world. There are, of course, they have a missile capacity. They could hit Eastern Saudi Arabia like they did in 2018 and blow up oil fields. So, these are the cost benefits. And this is why we wanted to avoid the war. Again, I will say that right now, my biggest concern is that if Iran is, it's painful to say this, right? There's no good choices. But if Iran is if Iran gets through this without a commitment to eliminate its nuclear enrichment program at this stage, I fear that they will make a fast, rapid bolt to a nuclear bomb. And that is a dangerous place. It's worse than what we currently have. Imagine what they're doing right now with a nuclear umbrella protecting them. And potentially from the Israeli perspective, sending one into Tel Aviv. So these are all the horror shows. Now, there doesn't mean they're going to happen. It is possible that despite the negative potential consequences, that a strike against nuclear facilities could lead the Iranian military potentially to take over the country and call for a truce, push out the Ayatollahs. There's a lot of unknowns, but this is the point, is when you get into military conflicts abroad, you just don't know how it's going to turn out. And a country like Iran, which is, for folks, 3 times the size of Iraq in population and land, 92 million people, as Ted Cruz was told by Tucker Carlson. This is the big one. And last thing I'll say is, I did this on CNN today. I worry about the happy talk, the utopianist view that there's like a regime change potential to fix and sweets and treats and fix this all. I'm interested in focusing on the issue at hand, which is the nuclear program and keeping the country from cracking up and more threats around like you. But I just don't, we don't have a diplomatic plan. I just don't see that plan. And I'm going to add one more thing. Why not? It's not clear there's any authority to do this. If in fact there is none.
That's what I'm asking next.
He would have to invoke the War Powers Act,
Yeah.
which is big enough to drive a Mack truck through, and he would then have to notify Congress within 60 days that he did something. But there's also this AUMF question, the authorization for the use of military force. And in defense after defense after defense authorization bill over the years, provisions have been stuck in saying this does not provide authorization for use of military force. And so Congress has a role.
Yeah.
Democrats are pretty unified in saying, justify it to us.
Mm-hmm.
So there is another possibility, which is that the Israelis and Iranians just continue to fight it out while we sit and watch.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting to watch. I was going to ask you that about this unilateral authority that everybody seems to be acting like Trump has here, and this sort of weird acquiescence, self-gelding acquiescence of his own party. Hello, Lindsey Graham, Mark Wayne McMullen, whatever the fuck his name is. What's her name? Katie Britt, all saying, "Oh, we trust in Donald Trump. We trust that he's going to make the right decision. And if that decision is that, we send a bunker buster to this Fordow, right? That's what it's called. Like, I trust him," which is the weirdest, strangest, like, abdication of their responsibilities and that I've ever seen.
They really should just resign from Congress at this stage because they don't clearly want to play any meaningful role amongst their constitutional duties. Substance aside, this is why they asked for people to vote for them. And this is why they got sworn into office, to make hard judgments on issues of war and peace and constitutionally required decisions related to sending Americans in harm's way. If you want to duck that, you literally have no reason to be in office. I will say that even Bush in the Iraq War did go through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Remember,
Hillary infamously. Yeah.
he went first to the United Nations, got UN support. Or no. First to the Congress, got an AUMF, and then went to the UN and got a Security Council resolution, 15-0. It's Russia and China on board. People don't love the results of the Iraq War, nor should they. But he and his administration lied on the intel, but they didn't hoodwink the world or the Congress.
Right.
The world and the Congress have more than enough bites of the apple, and they chose and they made a decision. I worked for a senator for a year, Tom Harkin, as a fellow, who voted for war authorization, a liberal Democrat from Iowa. And he would, in every interview a couple years after the war, say he regretted that vote more than any other thing. There was a ton of politics in that vote. I'm sorry, I'm going old school here. But you remember in 2002, in September, October, when Karl Rove, George Bush's Steve Bannon, was jamming Democrats, saying if you don't support invading Iraq, it's because you're with the terrorists like Al-Qaeda, and a nuclear bomb is going to go off in America. And so Democrats got scared and split in the Senate. And but they did vote. And everybody voted. It wasn't just the Democrats. Republicans voted too. And I feel like they owe the American people that. That's why we pay them for their work.
And not to mention, and we'll kind of close with this, but this is not what any of them supported him for. This is not what he ran on, right? This is exactly the opposite, which is partly why you're seeing this fracture in MAGA, which I'm always happy to see when they split and turn on each other. It's like, it's the, worst two people you could imagine fighting, and you hope they both lose. But there is this fracture because, and a lot of them have ulterior motives, etc., where there's a whole lot of people who said this is the opposite of what you said. You said no more forever wars. You said we were not the country of regime change. They're isolationists. They're truly isolationists. Whether or not Marjorie Taylor Greene is a fucking idiot, she is a genuine isolationist, and she will get on board, I'm sure, with whatever the fuck he does. But fundamentally, there's a big wing that is very much like, this is not what you told us you were going to do.
So one brilliant skill of Donald Trump is the ability to hoodwink people. And they got manipulated and gaslit, or whatever term you want to use, but it was bullshit from the start. And I think the America First moniker that he uses. Remember when Tucker started criticizing him, he said, well, I define it. It's my term. I made it up and I'd say what it is. And so what he's saying is it's sort of like America's King Kong, going out and beating things up and getting away and not leading, not organizing. Think of Russia, Ukraine, not engaging with our allies in diplomacy to be an American global leader, but sort of like beating, bullying. Think of the tariffs, right? Like unilateral bullying and then get away. That's America first. America's King Kong sort of thrashing around. And I think, even the people on the left bought it, right? Like Donald Trump is anti-war. Donald Trump is a peacemaker. He doesn't like war. I hear this so many times. Oh, he doesn't like war. He doesn't like. That's not accurate. It's that he doesn't want to get caught like in Bush did, and he doesn't want to get sucked into wars. But it's not like he doesn't want to do wars, and so he sort of left us in a purgatory because he's not fully engaged in leading diplomatically, and he sort of thinks that there are things we should do militarily, but he's not tying it together with his strategy. And so we're kind of left flopping around back and forth and watching this. And like, he's the captain of the ship and they're rocky seas and we're just holding on for dear life. And that's essentially his governing philosophy when it comes to foreign policy.
It's like a hangry toddler at snack time who gets his hands on the applesauce packets and instead of eating them, just squeezes them all around in the ceilings and the walls and then complains that he's hungry and then goes home.
I'm sorry, just to belabor, prolong it a little bit more. I got to say, like when there was the argument from the Tuckers and others, stay out foreign wars. Trump is very smart politically. He saw that as a winner and he says that and mouths that. I just don't believe that's true. He just doesn't want to do it in the way that Bush ended up doing it. And he doesn't want to do it the way Obama did it. So he's doing it his way. And we're now seeing it. The war in Gaza is worse.
Yeah.
The war in Ukraine is worse.
Yeah.
We now have Israel fighting Iran, which of course can lead to a variety of bad outcomes. China is more emboldened. Our allies in Asia don't trust us because of the tariff war. Canada, a benign neighbor to the north, hates us. Mexico despises us. I mean, this is like really not going in the right direction. And, I mean, you can be more caustic than I can on this, but, if he does, if the clock, what do they say? A clock is right. Even a broken clock is right today. It is possible. Because the one thing about us is that we have a brilliant military and our armed forces and the people who serve to protect our country are the best and the committed people and the best and the brightest, and they know how to do the right thing. And, if it comes to a decision to go for it, I have confidence in our military to do their job. I just really worry about every other part.
Yeah. I have nothing but the highest respect for the men and women of our military. As you know, it's near and dear to my heart. But it's almost as if handing their safety and welfare and the national security of this country and global stabilization to a guy who bankrupted casinos was not the best fucking idea. But, who am I to judge? I don't know. I'm old fashioned. Yeah. But with that, yes. But thank you so much, Joel, as always. Like, we got through a lot, and a lot of this stuff, I know. A lot of people are like, I don't understand. Abby, this is what I want to just say. A lot of people don't understand what's going on, and I will sort of like encapsulate the confusion of this moment by saying that my 12-year-old daughter said to me the other day, Mom, are they going to send a nuclear bomb to New York City? Is Iran? She said Iran. Is Iran going to send a nuclear bomb to New York City? This is where a lot of people in this country, 12 and up, right, where they're at right now, where they don't understand what's going on. They hear these words, they hear war, they hear nuclear bomb, they get freaked out. And when I get to talk to you, when people get to hear you explain all of these things, it makes a lot more sense. And it helps people feel less crazed and insane and scared and confused. So that's your amazing gift. And I'm so fucking grateful every time I get to talk to you, because I now have a better sense of everything and I feel a little less terrified in the weirdest way, even though we are at a very tumultuous and scary moment.
tumultuous times. And thank you for always being a fun person to talk to about this and providing a platform to talk about some of these really hard issues. And, you bring it into the real world, and these are real world things. These are not technical things. They're not in the academy. They're not sitting in some think tank, egghead's office drawer. This will affect all of us. It will affect the price of oil. It will affect war and peace, nuclear, all of it. So I really appreciate your allowing me the opportunity to talk to your audience, to me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And people say that foreign policy doesn't factor into elections, and I believe that in this particular case that is bullshit, because I don't think that that's going to ring true if we get to a midterm and beyond. But thank you so much, guys. The briefing book on Substack, that is Joel Rubin. You need to go check it out. You need to check out every channel on TV that he's on, because he's on every channel on TV doing just this basically every day, not to mention the BBC with 330 million people listening. Absolutely crucial, critical voice out there right now. Thank you so much, Joel.
My pleasure. Thanks, Joe.
Joel, thank you for your insight, your honesty, and your willingness to break down these complex issues for all of us. If you found this conversation helpful, if you're feeling a little more informed, a little less gaslit, or just a little more ready for what comes next, please rate and review Sanish. Share it with your friends and join our community on Substack and YouTube. Remember, democracy demands vigilance, and so does sanity. Stay strong, stay sane-ish, and keep asking the questions that matter.